Trans rights are one of the pressing civil rights issues of this generation, and because I don't have anything better to do with my life, I want to dedicate a few videos to trans rights topics, as well as LGBTQIA+ issues. For the first video in this loose mini-series of sorts, I want to talk about sports. More specifically, I want to talk about trans inclusion in sports, and go over why the main argument against trans inclusion in sports has more holes than Shia LaBeouf. So let's go over the main argument. Okay, so the main argument against the inclusion of trans women in sports goes like this. Trans women have a natural advantage against cis women because of their biology. This means if that advantage just didn't exist, then their main argument against the inclusion of trans women in sports would be an outright lie. Most of them believe that a testosterone check should be in place to prevent biological boys from infiltrating our athletic institutions. Specifically, less than 5 to 10 animals per liter. This is an important number for later, so let's write it down in our handy dandy notebook. An argument that always comes packaged with the main argument against the inclusion of trans women in sports is that because of that biological advantage that trans women have over cis women, it makes it harder for cis women to get scholarships. They use what they think sounds like feminist language to make it sound more progressive than it actually is. They use phrases and rhetoric like saving women's sports and biological boys are taking over women's sports.
When biological boys are allowed to compete against girls in sports like track, where the differences in performance are so great, we are talking about girls getting shut out, never getting the chance to win or even compete at all.
Oh hi PragerU, nice seeing you here. Not to mention the other extremely stupid argument that trans trenders will use the new trans visibility to sneak their way into women's sports. Under normal circumstances, I would just say something along the lines of, so much for personal responsibility, or cry about it, and leave it at that. But let's dig into this argument like a 3-course meal. I think there's a lot of problems with this argument, but I think the best place to start would be hormone levels, since it's the point that most people think they're clever for bringing up, and there is nothing I love more than making people feel stupid by putting them back in their place. But before I say anything, I do want to caveat that the study includes data on trans women and trans men, but I'm mostly going over the data on trans women and bringing up the numbers for trans men when relevant. With this little preamble out of the way, let's go and read the paper and see what it has to say. Just citing data isn't enough, and you have to have an understanding of the methodology behind how that data was gathered for it to mean anything. So let's go over the methods this study used to get the data that they got. The people who participated in the study were 18 years or older and did not start hormone treatment until they participated in the study. The data was collected from 2010 to 2016 and studied 249 trans women and 278 trans men who were seen every 3 months. During those checkups, they would measure grip strength, body mass, bone mass, hormone levels, etc. for 12 months. This is a very abridged version of the methodology, but if you'd like to know way too much, I'd recommend checking out the sources in the description. Assigned male at birth individuals, or AMAB, produce testosterone, and those levels of testosterone vary from person to person. For adults, those levels range from 12 to 37 nanomoles per liter. Assigned female at birth individuals, or AFAB, also produce testosterone in lower amounts, and in premenopausal adults ranges from 0.3 to 1.8 nanomoles per liter, and in postmenopausal adults ranges from 0.2 to 1.3 nanomoles per liter. Those hormones are responsible for a lot of the biological differences between the sexes, but these levels are highly variable and don't account for intersex individuals as well as people with hormonal abnormalities or disorders. But the question remains, how much of an effect does 1 year of hormone therapy have on the hormone levels of a trans woman? Well, the data is very interesting to say the least. So let's go and read it, I guess. Before the hormone therapy, the trans woman had testosterone levels that ranged from 13.5 to 23 nanomoles per liter. But after just 1 year of hormone therapy, they had a range of 0.4 to 1.1 nanomoles per liter. Those of you probably think that's a lot of testosterone in trans women, but compared with the averages I laid out, it's so minuscule that it's not even worth consideration. So trans women after 1 year of hormone therapy have testosterone levels that fall within the averages I laid out. This means that the testosterone check wouldn't do anything other than catch people using testosterone supplements, something I doubt trans women would use given that's the thing that most of them are trying to get rid of because of the whole being a woman thing. And just in case it's important for later, let's talk about the numbers for trans men. Before hormone therapy, trans men had hormone levels that range from 0.7 to 1.7 nanomoles per liter, and after hormone therapy, it ranged from 11.2 to 39 nanomoles per liter. Okay, so now that we know a testosterone check wouldn't catch anybody, I should talk about the advantage that trans women have over cis women, or go over the lack of an advantage they have. Whenever people need to transition, they use hormone blockers to block the hormones their body makes. Trans people often go on hormone replacement therapy to replace the hormones their body makes. As I said previously, the testosterone levels of trans women are around that of most cis women after 1 year of hormone replacement therapy.
But what about muscle mass, growth, strength, bone density, etc.? Wouldn't those be the same even after a full year of hormone therapy?
No! But I can't say that without any evidence, so let's meticulously detail how hormones affect the body. Okay, so something I think is important to mention is that hormone therapy helps redistribute fat and muscle to different parts of your body depending on the hormones. For example, trans men on testosterone will typically see fat from their hips and thighs redistributed to their arms, legs, and abdomen, while the opposite typically happens to trans women, as fat will be redistributed to your hips and thighs, while your arms and legs will be a lot less defined. Which is why some trans people go on them, since they can help with affirming someone's gender. This is something you think would be brought up when people have these discussions, but is conveniently left out by TERFs. I wonder why. The study found that after a full year of hormone therapy, the grip strength of trans women decreased, which scientists correlated with a decrease in creatine. It's creatine. As well as a decrease in muscle mass in trans women.
What's creatine and why is it so important?
I am so glad you asked. Okay, so creatine is a thing in your body that helps you make adenosine triphosphate, which, for those of you who didn't pay attention in biology, provides energy to those juicy muscles of yours. In trans men, an increase in testosterone was correlated with increased grip strength, more muscle mass, and an increased concentration of creatine. The study hypothesized that the testosterone may be the reason for the increased strength in trans men and decreased strength for trans women, as well as the increased concentration of creatine in trans men and decreased concentration in trans women. I guess the people advocating against trans inclusion in sports must have conveniently forgotten that the WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency, founded by Dick Pound, prohibited the use of testosterone because of its correlation with increased athletic performance. I mean, if someone like me, who hasn't done any exercise a day in their fat life, can see the discrepancies in this argument, then something has gone wrong, hasn't it? Okay, so now that we've debunked the bullshit lies that TERFs use to stifle trans acceptance and inclusion in sports, let's talk about why TERFs suck, more or less. Oh, and rhetoric that TERFs use. I wanted this video to be me lightheartedly dunking on TERFs for being obviously wrong, but I felt like I had to talk about how TERF rhetoric is used to maintain the status quo of oppressing trans people, which is kind of a bummer, some would say. Something you've probably noticed is that the less brazen TERFs like to present the ways that these ideas affect trans people as a side effect and not the aim. I would assume that this is to dodge accusations of transphobia, all the while spreading transphobic rhetoric and ideas, just all gussied up to not sound overtly transphobic. This is fucking hilarious when you consider that a lot of TERFs are more fixated on potential abuse of the system by bad actors, rather than the abuse and discrimination of trans people by the current system. In the past, I've mentioned how the healthcare system fucks over trans people, and how homeless shelters fuck them over too. But that doesn't include all the LGBTQIA+ people who have been kicked out, beaten, murdered, or made to feel like a deviant, mentally ill, or sinful for simply existing. Before, when I said that people could cry about trans women stealing scholarships from cis women, I was only half joking. While I think the idea of scholarships are stupid, they're best given to the economically disenfranchised or people of minority groups. I mean, those two groups tend to have a lot of overlap, but I digress. Especially when a lot of trans people have to deal with paying for their transition, which can be very expensive, as health insurance companies can refuse to cover some of the costs even though that's illegal, or covering such a minuscule amount that you're still getting fucked over, not to mention price gouging for everything from estrogen to insulin. Like many other movements that oppose human rights, it's not about force busing, water fountains, bathrooms, or sports. It's all about fucking over a group of people by limiting their opportunities and quality of life by any means possible, such as offensive caricatures, stereotypes, spreading misinformation about a group, demonizing and promoting legislation that disproportionately affects that group of people. In conclusion, if you went through the whole video and still left with the conclusion that trans people shouldn't be allowed in sports, you have either not been listening to my points, or you're a bigot. I'll let you ponder which one you would rather be, but please feel free to go down in the comments and call me a stupid anyways because the mean lady said you're wrong. I think it's ridiculous that anybody actually takes what TERFs say seriously, especially if you've done any research into the topics of sports and those devious transes. Why did I write that? I'm not one to end these videos with calls to action. That being said, I'm trying to be optimistic about the acceptance of trans people in the future despite the current socio-political climate. Because being pessimistic isn't a luxury that we have. We can't mope around and feel sad about how everything feels stacked against us, because that only benefits the people who would rather see us suffer. We can work together to make trans acceptance something that is not negotiable or up for debate, but we have to do it together.